Welcome back everybody, Steve from the Pinball Room. Today we're going to build our first wiring harness. Probably should have made it a little bit earlier. If you've been watching my videos, you've probably noticed that my wiring is getting a little bit out of control. Whenever I lift up my Playfield, you just see kind of this giant, just rat's nest ball of wire that's getting tangled up just kind of down here at the bottom. It's become a real pain to deal with because things are getting tangled. It's time. Might have been time earlier, but it's time now definitely to go through to a wiring harness. If you're more OCD than I am and you've been doing a nice organized wiring harness system, cable management from the very beginning, I applaud you, kudos, good on you. I didn't bother with that. I wanted things to be kind of quick and dirty initially. I was moving so many things around. But we're past that point. We're pretty final on where position of things are going to be. We've got all the primary mechs in place and the wiring is just out of control. So I've got this old whitewood up here because, and I mentioned this in my last video, but because I've been inspired by Stern Pinball and some of the making of videos I've been watching where they kind of show some behind the scene views of like their assembly line and how different things get done. Particularly there is a video, it's a virtual tour of the pinball, of their whole pinball manufacturing plant by Jack Danger. I highly recommend it. I'll throw a view of it up here so you can try to find that video. And he does a great job. It's probably better than any actual real live in-person tour you could get. Better than when I got years ago when I stopped by Stern Pinball Factory. I stopped by, I want to say in 2016, 2017, and it was a day when nobody was even working, and we kind of knocked on the door, and finally one of the guys let us in, one of the marketing guys, I forget his name, I'm sorry, I'm so bad with names, it's been so long, and he was nice enough to let us in and kind of give us a quick nickel tour for about 5-10 minutes around everything. But there was a bunch of Ghostbusters online. That was the time period. They had Ghostbuster Playfields and cabinets sitting around everywhere, and a little bit of medieval madness as they were assembling for Chicago Gaming Company. Anyway, long story short, I didn't get to see anybody actually working on the line. It was nice. This video walkthrough by Jack Danger is like amazing because there are people there actively working. He stops like at each station, talks with them, shows what they're doing. Okay. Of interest for today was the wiring station he showed, and they had workers that had this like board in the background with like a drawing, with some notes, like a schematic, and then a bunch of like nails or pins sticking out. And the workers were going through and taking the wires and bringing them up and like wrapping around the nails and then tying them off on the end. So it was a series of drawings and nails that let them know like which wire went where. Would go up a channel, would wrap around, kind of bend around a nail, go to another point, they'd wrap around it, terminate it, cut it, do the next one. And at the end of it, they had this nice wiring harness that had kind of like the main like aorta or main channel, then all the little tendrils, veins splitting off to all the individual mechs, and it was all done. They kind of zip tie around it and say, here you go. Now you just need to put the connectors on it. I don't see why we can't do a very similar thing. So instead of just like a drawing, I'm just going to use our last whitewood as basically the template. I'm going to draw out in pencil kind of like where these main lines need to be and how I think will make sense. And then I'm going to go through and take my nail gun with like some 3-inch nails, and we'll shoot through, because this is obviously a very thin board, right? Those nails will shoot through on the other side, and then we'll be able to wrap around those nails and do the same type of thing. I think it's a good idea. I think it should work. So anyway, that's what we're going to do. So let's get to it. All right. So as we start doing this, one of the first things that we need to make sure we're taking into consideration is not just, the wires itself for the Playfield, but then we also need to make sure we can kind of calculate out how much of a tail, how much slack we need to leave for that disconnect that connects from the cabinet to the Playfield, so that whenever the Playfield is being pulled out and lifted up, you've got enough slack that things aren't going to suddenly get yanked out of connectors and ripped off of places, things like that. So I'm starting just kind of right here in the middle of this lower Playfield, and I've drawn just kind of like a little square, just to kind of for me represent. That's going to be kind of like all these wires are going to come to here. That's going to be kind of that final gathering point. And then from there, I'm going to have this tail of, like 2 or 3 feet of wire still coming out that then will be like this one single braid that will come down to that disconnect. And that should give, between the couple of feet here and a couple of feet on the other end, that should give plenty of slack. Might be a little bit too much, but we'll measure it out more precisely when we do like a final wiring harness. That should be plenty. I will double check that number before I do it though, just in case that's not enough, but I'm pretty sure it will be. All right, not sure how well you can see the actual like pencil marks, but I'm going to say that my braid's going to come up, like I said, and start right about here. And that's where it's going to come out, have the tail. So from here, this is going to be kind of the central gathering point with a nail, where I'm going to need to have wires coming out here to my slingshot, those wires for both slingshot, out to my flippers, okay, and tying off there. And I need to make sure that I have enough wire. So I'm actually, these lines probably need to be drawn kind of like past it to make sure I have a little bit of extra slack there, right? Kind of past them. And then I need to have wire coming over here to my pop bumper, okay? And then I'm gonna have wires come up, probably have another nail here, and then have wires come across, another nail here, up and over for this 4-bank drop target mech. Over here, another nail for this bend, and then each one of these switches here for these stand-ups. Okay, we'll do those. And then we'll come up a little further, another nail. We've got another set of wires for a flipper, for that upper flipper right there for the middle of the playfield. Then we need to come up, and from here, we need to have one that comes over to the scoop. Okay, and then we have wires that come here for this drop target that we're gonna have here in front. Okay, let's see, what else we got going on here? That's the Newton ball. We've got wires that need to come over for these drop targets. So I'm thinking again, we can have a wire come across over to about here, and then have this coming all the way up. We need to have wires for a flipper mech. Okay, and then for this drop target, oops, and then this drop target, and then this drop target, okay? And then we'll need to come across here and head on up to this flipper mech. Don't move. And then from there, come across over here for the horseshoe diverter mech, okay? And that's all the mechs, right? Flipper, flipper, drop, 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 diverter, scoop, drop targets, flipper. I think I've got like everything mapped out on here the way I need to do it. What I'm thinking I'll do is I'm gonna start from the termination of each of these, right? So let's say, for example, these optical switches here at the top of the stairs. I will have a nail here, I will wrap some wire around that, and then I will start tracing it back to the main artery. And then once I get down to here, then I'll leave, again, like another like 2 or 3 feet of slack and then cut it, okay? And so this will be kind of like our final kind of zip tie point, right? Where we'll like kind of gather everything together, then we'll have the big braid coming off. So I think that's how we'll do it. I'll start at the end of each one of these, right? The location of where the wires need to be connected to the actual mechs or switches, and then, you know, work my way back. Yeah, okay. I think that's gonna work. So we've got it drawn. Now let's pound some nails. One question you're probably having, and rightly so, is, Steve, if everything is red and black combos, how are you going to know like which one's which at the end of all your pigtails here, so you can wire it, you know, connect it appropriately? That is an excellent question. Ideally, you would be using more than just 2 colors. If you remember before, I had, you know, blue for my high power voltage, black for my ground, and then I had yellow for switches and green for this, and yeah. So you should go through and make sure you have enough of the right different colors of wire and or stripe them yourself, etc. So you can easily know which ones are which. I had ran out of wire and everything is on back order, and this is all I could get for right now, and I didn't want to wait around for the 2 or 3 weeks. I got too much to do. We got too short of a timeline between now and our show in June 3rd up in Tacoma, Washington. So we got to get moving on this. So all I could get were some small spools right now. I've got some larger 1,000-foot spools on the way in assorted colors, so we will come back through and color code these appropriately. For now, I'm just gonna have to be very careful and kind of like trace my wires and know exactly which one's which. And then when I get down to the end of doing all that, I'll probably get like some masking tape and label them. So I just realized I'm doing this a little bit wrong. I'm like, wow, I'm getting so much wire so fast. I'm going through, I'm starting each one, but I'm not daisy chaining these at all right now. I should still be daisy chaining all the grounds most of the power. Like I don't want every single one to be ran individually. I'm not doing that. I'm not running to like some power block distribution, and that's just a lot of extra wire. I do want to daisy chain around. So I just wasted almost 2 spools of wire a little bit. I'm gonna have to see what I can do to kind of reuse that. Let's start again, shall we? And I think this through a little bit more, Steve. So I went through and I drew lines from the center kind of out to everything. But what I need to think about are which ones I want to have connected and draw a path that connects like all of those together. All right, so we started again. Now we have, this is high voltage 1 coming in and running to the left flipper, then connected to the left slingshot, to the pop bumper, to the 4-bank, to the right mid flipper, to the right slingshot, to the right lower flipper. That will be high voltage 1. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think we're good. It's not too crazy. Okay, so that's the high voltage for that one. Now we need to go through and figure out the grounds for each of these. And these grounds don't need to be coming through here because they're not going to the disconnect. They're going to be going straight to an I/O board. So I'm thinking I'm going to do this that way. I'm going to go through and like run the power lines, and then I'll come back through and do the grounds for everything. All right, so we've got power and grounds ran for all 32 coils. Yeah, I just went through and counted them all up. 32 coils exactly, which is great because that's exactly how many coils I can drive from the boards I have. I've got a 3208 that runs 8, a 1616, so that's another 16, and then an 0804. It's going to be, does that add up correctly? That doesn't add up correctly. I'm 4 short, aren't I? And it's a high number of coils because I have so many smart drop targets. I've got 8 smart drop targets, and so that's 16 coils right there. There's the main reset coil and the small knockdown coil on each one of those. So I need to get another I/O board because I only have enough spots to drive 28 coils on the 3 boards I have, the 3208, the 0804, and the 1616. So I'll need to order another 1616. One of the things I figured out as I was doing this that I started out doing wrong, like you saw me correct part of it, was at first I just kind of like running every wire out, right? I needed to like, what I figured out later on is I need to figure out what's the placement for the I/O boards, the controller boards. I'm going to have one right about here, which will handle the 8 coils on my lower playfield and a lot of those switches. I'm going to have another one up here above the VUC, and that can handle another good chunk of coils. And then I'll have another one over here that'll run all these drops right through here. So knowing where those controller boards were going to fit in the playfield around the mechs was very important because that's where I put nails, because that's where I need to go through and run all those ground cables, right, from every coil to that control board. This was what I was working with before. So yeah, I mean, it's an improvement. This is definitely an improvement, but I don't know. I'm not as satisfied as I thought I would be. Like it's looking good, but anyway, I don't know. Once I get this actually like hooked into boards and actual mechs, I can come back through and get a little more pristine and tight and organized with my wires. It might look better, but yeah, I don't know. I was hoping to look a little bit prettier at this point, so I'm not sure exactly what I need to be doing differently, but oh, first attempt, we're getting there, right? Okay. All right, so I know it doesn't look like it, but I've been working on this for a good 2-3 hours. Yeah, like it's working, but it's not working quite as good as I would have hoped. I mean, like honestly, I could have had the whole entire thing wired up, switches, power lines, and everything within a matter of like an hour probably, if I just did it the way I had done before, just wire per wire. And maybe we'll be generous and say it would have maybe taken me another hour if I really wanted to go through more slowly and route things and make it clean along the way. But I think that a couple hours, I think I could have had this all done. And I spent more than that time already just doing this harness, and I haven't even started the switches. I'm still just messing around with the power wires. So not totally convinced that this is the most efficient way of doing it. And I don't know that so much really the concept of doing it on like some sort of like an assembly board is wrong, but I'm definitely still kind of guessing the best way to go about this. One of the things I figured out along the way that I'm going to try to do differently when I start doing the wiring harness for the switches is the approach I took from this was I started at my point of origin, right? The starting point for the wires was for each mech. I would get a wire, I would crimp it with my quick connect, I would kind of do a quick little knot, and then I go from there and route it to where the controller board's going to be, that it's going to be going to, or the high voltage we daisy chained around. The high voltage wasn't really an issue, but as far as for all the grounds, I started from the mech and went to the board, okay? And I've got spots where I'm going to having to have 3 boards. And I think I should have done it backwards, because now I've gone through and I've got like where the board's going to be. I've just got this, these mass of wires that are labeled and twisted around, and they're not all like exactly linked. They're not all with the exact same amount of slack, And so when it comes time now, like I can go through and I can start zip tying all this up and try to keep it together nice and neat. But when I get to the board, maybe it doesn't matter, but when I get to the board, I'm going to need to go through then and cut these and get all the right connections. I guess it doesn't matter which direction I go. I just like what I'm wanting to avoid and what I'm worried I'm going to run into is I don't want to go through and kind of like, zip tie these and get things kind of nice and ready, and then get to the end and like plug things in and have to like adjust my zip ties and cut and redo those all over again. And I feel like I'm kind of guessing doing it in this assembly board versus doing it straight on the Playfield. And part of that's because like, well, I've got a slingshot mech right here. Well, I want to make sure I had plenty of wire, and so I have my wire kind of go past it, behind it over here, and because depending on exactly how I route that, and I don't know. I feel like the way I'm going about it is just too imprecise. I feel like there's just a lot of guessing on exact lengths. It has been helpful as far as going through and trying to visualize like the right path for routing wires, right? Like I have all these drop targets here, and this is like my second or third time. You see I've got a bunch of extra wires that I did that end up being the wrong length and are too short now to use, kind of throwaway. So that was dumb that I kind of crimped all my quick connects. I wasted like 20 quick connects on that, on different wires. I've got one over here. It's long enough. I hope to reuse it, but I haven't yet. Anyway, my point being, like on these drop targets, I wasn't really paying attention at first and thinking, oh, I'm gonna have a board over here. So I just kind of was having everything right across like this middle drop target for some reason. Duh, I can't have wires going right through where there's a mech. I need to make sure they're going around the mechs where the mechs are going to be, right? I did that with most everything else, kind of going around, but for these drop targets I didn't. I had to do those all over again, wasted some wire. So it's been helpful for really trying to kind of visualize where I can route things based on where the mechs are. And I can do the same thing for the switches. So it hasn't been a complete waste, but I mean, could I not have just done that on the back of my actual Playfield? I mean, manufacturers use assembly boards because they're trying to crank out, multiple wiring harnesses, right? The same wiring harness over and over, thousands for the pinball machines. And so they're just gonna, assembly line it, make your wiring harnesses, move it across, move it on. But I guess the part I'm missing is how do they do it so that, they're not necessarily just totally guessing. Okay, part of what I've been reading up a little bit on YouTube and looking around at different things are, for like companies that do this, is they do have like precise measurements. And so like I kind of looked up a little bit, kind of like the wiring harnesses for dummies type thing, right? And it's like kind of like the primary production steps are you have all the wires cut to the exact length. So they know exactly what length these things need to be. I'm kind of guessing on that right now. So that's probably one of the biggest gaps I guess I have with my approach. They've gone through and they have done like a final prototype, I guess, right? And they have it working exactly right. And then they go through and they measure those. They know, okay, this wire for all these harnesses need to be this exact length. I haven't done that. So that's probably one of the big gaps. But so it's like have all wires cut to the exact length. You have all the wires stripped and tinned, which is just getting ready for soldering, right? You put a little bit of flux and solder on the end, so they're ready to go for soldering. And then if there are any special types of like connectors, or sometimes you have to do multiple joints where you're combining two wires into a spot, they'll kind of do some of that prep. But I think the main thing really is just measuring the wires to that exact length, and I feel like I'm guessing so much, and so things still look super messy and not really organized at this point for me. Like I want everything to just look, nice and clean and straight like this at the end. And I feel like I'm just, I don't know exactly how much. I've got slack here and it's looking really sloppy, so I'm getting a little frustrated, but I'm trying not to. Anyway, So that's kind of the update, I guess, on where I'm at after like literally like 3 hours, and it's the next day now. It's now Sunday, and so I'm coming back fresh and just trying to figure out, okay, how can I make this go a little bit better and a little more clean? I took some of the wires. That's not the right one. Where is it at? Okay. For example, I went through and took some of the wires that I had before that are going to be for these for drop targets, and I already got them correct lengths, and then put into this receptacle. I thought maybe I need to go through and, like, instead of having the full board here, I just have like the receptacle, and I actually go through and put these connections on, and I, then measure out. I know exactly how much I need. I don't know that really helped me any. Again, like, until I actually get it on the Playfield with the actual mechs and know the precise length. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Maybe I'm not really ready for this assembly board approach. Maybe it doesn't necessarily make sense. Maybe the best way to go about it is just to do it the way that I have been, where I have my actual Playfield with my actual mechs, start from my mechs, and just be more deterministic, be more specific, more intentional on the path that I take the wires to their circuit, to their controller boards, and get those the exact length in the exact place. Yeah, maybe I just need to do it from that. And then, if I was going to create, 2 or 3 copies of my homebrew pinball machine, I would do that once on the actual Playfield. Then I would know exactly the length of the wires, so the length of every wire down. And then when I came over to like an assembly board, I would know this wire needs to be exactly this long, route it, boom, okay. And maybe I'm just getting ahead of myself, trying to go straight to an assembly board when I haven't even gone through and done a final wiring harness on the prototype with the actual mechs, so I don't know exact wire lengths. And so maybe that's what's getting a little bit more difficult. Anyway, I think what I have is salvageable, but I'm really getting tempted just to kind of abandon the assembly board and just throw up my actual Playfield and just do the wiring and just be careful and intentional about the routing of the wire on that. And actually, I've got so much to do in the next few weeks to get this thing done that, don't hate me, but I think I might abandon this idea of the assembly board for right now and just get the actual Playfield up here with the actual mechs and just run the wires precisely. And I'll be very careful as I go about it to make sure I'm routing things well and grouping them and keeping them all gathered. Yeah, I think that's what I'm gonna do. I'm too stressed that I'm gonna screw around with this for another whole day and not even really have it any better than I would have done. And I just gotta get this wired and get on to the next thing. We got so much more we need to do. See, another reason this is important, this Playfield's taller than that one. So I'm hoping that our length of my wires up here that I did is actually correct. So what I'm having to do here is, these were all so tight, those stand-ups and the drop targets and everything, that if you remember, I rotated this coil from pointing out to the side to pointing up, but then with the wood and with the stand-up right behind it, it made it to where these lugs were inaccessible. I couldn't get to them. So I need to kind of bend each of these lugs forward slightly and get the wires on before I assemble it back up, or else that's gonna be, yeah, I'm not gonna be able to get them on. All right, we got power and all the grounds ran. I realized going through and doing the upper Playfield that it's a pain in the butt to get to all the connections on the upper Playfield, and trying to be able to take it out and have enough wire, have enough slack and all that. So for my next round of cables, I'm gonna have to do another one. That upper playfield, I need to go through and get a separate harness for it. All the wires need to be connected, come off of it, and come to some sort of Molex connector. And then from there, have a receiver that will give it the power, and then also come down and connect into my controller board so that I can just disconnect this chunk of cables, unscrew my upper playfield, and take it off. I should have thought of that ahead of time, but what I'm doing right now actually is I came back in, and remember how I mentioned that I needed to, like, at some point redo the wiring for the upper playfield. So it just had a nice quick disconnect here, had a Molex connector, however you say that. This is a 9-pin connector. So these 8 coils up here, 2 times 4 for the drop targets, right? 2 coils per mech, a knockdown and a reset coil. Anyway, all those plus high voltage power needs to be ran over to this. So I'm doing that. So I started to go through and already do it on some of these. I've got the one side done, and now I got to go through and do all the rest, but I need more wires, and I don't need the really long ones. That'll be a good one. I can use that for something. But I actually need some shorter wires, so I'm just going through and untangling and trying to figure out what wires I can use. So wiggle, 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 wiggle. Oh, don't break it. Don't break the lead. Oh, I'm breaking the lead here. The lug. Don't break the lug. All right, so we got all these, and we're ready to throw them inside the receiver, but we got to make sure that they match up. And so I did all these in a certain order. All right, I went from the first pin in this set, so technically pin number 8, but we're gonna say pin number 1. There's 9 wires, 8 controllers, 1 high voltage, okay, into the 9-pin connector. So I just took, for coil number 1, I'm sure how exactly we'll number them. Right now I have them as upper drop 1, upper drop 2, upper drop 3, upper drop 4. And then so there's upper drop 1, knockdown, upper drop 1, reset. There's 2 coils, right? So anyway, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I went through and I went from the top left. I did 1, 2, 3, brought it back 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then high power. So I need to make sure these line up so I know in my computer exactly which one's controlling which. I had written down on my handy dandy laptop. By the way, I got to show you. You recognize that? Yeah, from Stranger Things. When I got the, I have a Stranger Things Pro that's on my route, and I got the UV kit, and that came with a separate apron, right? And so I had extra decals. So I put the decals on my laptop. I like it. All right, anyway, that's neither here nor there. Okay, so I have this written down here. Can you see it? The camera's probably not gonna record it very well. Sorry. Anyway, first one is upper drop 1, reset, then knockdown, reset, knockdown, reset, knockdown. So I just need to make sure that I do these kind of in a similar order so it makes sense. So this will be on the left side, and we'll call that number 1. All right. And just like that, we now have a nice little harness to connect. We can take our upper playfield on and off. Makes me happy. All right, let's put it on. See how this works. Yeah, let's take a look at this. I want you to see this from underneath. Bloop, bloop. We'll connect those two together. In fact, let's do that right now. There we go. Connected. Out of the way. Things down a little bit. We don't mind wires hanging down. We could zip tie those if we wanted to, but we're good for right now. All right. And then boom, 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 boom. Look at that inside there. Can you see that? So we're totally out of the way. Clear for where the ball guides are, inside all that. That's kind of a cool view, isn't it? Hey guys, we did it. All right. Yay! Still so much more wiring left to do. All right, upper playfield is wired though. So we've got power everywhere, but we got no switches. All right, I started a couple switches. Oh, I'm not sure if I showed you this or not. This is just my small 0804 board, only drives 4 coils here. So I've ordered another 1616 board. So Aaron's back from TPF. Hopefully he'll get that out to me soon, and I'll have it in a week or two. And I'll need to replace this board. So right now, these 4 drop targets only have the resets. They don't have the knockdowns. I want them to have both. This guy, I want to be able to have it come up, but then also get knocked down automatically depending on where the ball is with the stairs. And then these guys, same thing, right? They're all going to be up, but I want it to where when you start a game, these are all down, and there's a skill shot where if you short plunge to this flipper, and this guy is way off, huh? But if you short plunge to the flipper, that you'd be able to shoot in here and have this go up and trap your ball, okay? That way you have an immediate ball lock to be able to do like a 2-ball multi-ball. Because this guy is going to be where you're going to be able to stage a multi-ball and maybe have like a special bonus multiplier when you get this ball into play. So you got the multi-ball through the stairs, but then you're also going to be able to go through kind of like TNA, right? Total Nuclear Annihilation with the 3 inline targets. You'll be able to go through and do like a Denisi lock the ball behind him, and then hit the ball in here again, boop, and then you'll have a 2-ball multi-ball that can stack with your mode, give you a 2-ball multi-ball, can stack with your multi-ball, okay? So you could have 5 balls here, you could have a 6th ball here, so you could have a 6-ball multi-ball would be the maximum. And then I want this to progressively get harder, so when you first start a ball, it's easy, you just have to go through and lock it, right? For like one of your skill shots. But then maybe after you've done it the first time, after you lock it in there, both these targets come up. And then before you can release, you have to go in there twice to release the ball. And then maybe eventually have to get in there 3 times before the ball will get released, right? And then just through normal gameplay, maybe, you know, if you don't hit the skill shot, 1 target comes up, and then you have to go in there once to be able to lock a ball. And the next time you have to be able to knock down both these targets before you I haven't thought it all the way through, but it gives lots of options. And so I really like having these be controllable. And it's a homebrew, so bill of materials, I can spend whatever I want, right? In a normal game, to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 technically drop targets. That's a lot. I was listening to a podcast the other day and somebody was telling me, or not telling me, but one of the podcasts is like one of the old designers, maybe it's even Keith Elwin, I forget, somebody talking about how, actually I think it was Silverball Chronicles. If you haven't started watching or listening to the Silverball Chronicles podcast, this is one of my favorite podcasts. It is my favorite pinball podcast right now. David Dennis and the other guy, forget your name, but you're awesome. They go through and they're doing kind of like a historical podcast where they go through and talk about the history of pinball and like different manufacturers, different designers, and all the games they've done. And they do a really good job of digging through all the different archives that are out there and kind of gathering together and summarizing the story behind the pinball machines. I cannot praise it enough. If you guys are not familiar with that pinball podcast, you've got to go try it out. I'm going to put the words up here. I'm going to put the link in my show notes. Seriously, you've got to go listen to it. Go through, listen to them, give them a good review in your podcatcher, whichever service you're using. But my whole point is, I think they were talking about one of the interviews they found of some game designers. They were like, you know what? We always knew that management was going to come back and say, okay, that's great. What can we take out of this to make it a little bit more inexpensive? And so they throw in an extra drop target, just knowing they're going to have to take something out and say, oh, we'll just take out that drop target. We didn't really need it because drop targets are so expensive, the mechs. And these are very expensive because they're dual coil. So, I mean, for me as a retail, right, from Pinball Life, each one of these is like $80. Shoot, maybe they're up to 100 now because of COVID pricing. I'm not sure. It's a lot of coils. So we need 32 coils, a lot of drop targets, but it gives us a lot of flexibility in what we can do with the modes. Maybe we won't need the whack-a-mole up here. Maybe these will go back to regular stand-up or regular drop targets. We'll have to see. I definitely went overboard, and I love drop targets, so I put in lots of them. So we need more controller boards so we can actually control them all. So, yeah, this would be an expensive game to actually mass produce. Assuming it even works. We'll find out. Okay. But we're getting there. Hey, we've got this nice disconnect now. Everything else is hooked up. So now all the power is in. It's all about the switches. I said that once before already. I'm sorry I'm repeating myself. Okay. I'm going to pause there and see if I even have what I need to do my switch wiring. Otherwise, I'm going to have to wait till tomorrow. So we'll come back. All right, we've gotten a lot done. So all the power wiring is done. We got this all set up. And now I started to do switches. I still need to do these switches. But I've got these switches done. I've got a few extra wires here that are going to be for my optical switches. This optical switch is going to come into this board. I'm just trying to go through now and figure out, okay, exactly which switches need to be routed to where to make sure I don't run out of switch space. All of these are going on my 3208, and that gives me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 plus another 8 for the trough and shooter lane, so 19 out of the 32. So that leaves me another 12 or 13. So that should cover whatever else I might need to have going on down here that I'm not thinking of. This drop target mech, assuming we can really get it to be compatible, this has good labeling on here and says, 5 volt in, ground, and then switch 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm not sure what the last pin is. I've got to double check. Anyways, I might need to skip one of those, but I feel like we can figure it out just so long as that signal can be interpreted by the Fast hardware okay. I'm gonna ask the guys at Fast and see if anybody's worked with this mech before, make sure we can get to work. If not, that's going to be a major problem because this is all relying off optical switches, and I'm not sure how I could put in physical switches. Anyway, so that's a big question, is making sure we can actually read the switches from this. We've got power for the coil. I'm positive that's going to work. It's all just about whether or not we can read the down state, right, from the optical switch. That's another 4 switches there that we still need to go through and wire. We got to do our 4 optical switches, and then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 targets back here to wire. Those will go to this 1616 board because that's the board that's driving the coils. Yeah, always got to make sure that your switches are coming back to the same board that the corresponding coil is being driven by, right? So you have a switch that's going to drive a coil, they should be on the same board. With the exception, remember, the first 4 spots on your 3208, those switches can input or can control other coils. That's how these coils that are being powered by this board are still being triggered by the switch from over here, because as you go through and connect these boards, these 4 switches are recognized across all the boards. So any coil, no matter where it is in the loop, that we hook up in our config file to be driven by one of the first 4 switches, which is where our flipper buttons are, they'll receive the signal and drive. But all the other switches, other than those first 4, they're only going to drive things on the same board. Okay, so these coils are being driven here, so the switches need to come back here. And these coils are being driven by this board, so their switches need to come back here, and so forth, right? Okay, so yeah, I'm out of connectors for doing all the switches. I've got a few here that I think can work. So yeah, I'm not quite done. All right, I'm gonna hurry and go through and get these 7 switches hooked up and over here to this board really fast. And then I think I gotta call it a night. We're gonna call it a wrap, and we'll get this video up and edited out, because that's gonna be all my switches other than this drop target bank and the optos. So I'll get these switches ran. What's going on with this ground right here? Forgot about him. All right, I don't think he's important. No, I'll double check, but actually I'm pretty sure that's the end of my line. I was recycling wire for my last setup, and I don't think I need this wire anymore, but I will double check before I cut it. Actually, no, that's right. These are gonna be for my optical switches. Haha, I knew I had a reason for these. These are gonna be the grounds for my optical switches. They're gonna correspond to these. Okay. Okay, I just realized why I hadn't done these switches yet. It's okay that I hooked up that wiring, but I'm glad I didn't connect all of these because I would have wasted a lot of my precious little pins. These can't go directly to the board. I mean, they can, but I don't want them to. Instead, this is part of the upper playfield. And what are we doing with the upper playfield? We're making it to where we can disconnect all the cables and pull it out more easily. So just like I have one of these connectors for all the power and grounds, I need to have a similar one for the switches and their ground. So, and I don't have any of those. I actually just barely ordered them this afternoon. They'll be here in like, I don't know, a week probably. Those are in my list on my build materials spreadsheet in my description. Thank you for a couple of you that called me out that I had kind of gotten lazy, hadn't put everything up there that I'd bought. So I added those, and now I've got links for these things, which were some of the more difficult things to find. I got them from a couple different sites to get the right pins and right connectors. Anyways, those are on their way. So this is as far as I'm going for right now. I've got them. I kind of gathered them together. I will probably undo these zip ties and redo it. So I just have a central disconnect just like this that'll all get put together. Anyway, so that's as far as we can go on the switches for today. So we're going to call it a wrap. So thank you very much for watching. I know it was a lot of time lapse. Might have been kind of boring, but I mean, we're getting there. We're definitely more organized than we were before. All right, don't look at that part. That will get cleaned up once we get all the rest of the switches in, but it's getting there. Things are mostly staying away. I have these coming down tight. I do need to 3D print some standoffs, some cable standoffs, so I can keep the wires about 4 or 5 inches off the bottom of the playfield, just so I have room for lights and to keep things away from mechs, so they're not coming down and getting in the way of things that are moving. So we'll come through and do that. But really the next thing is going to be getting these optos in and getting this drop bank mech working, like I mentioned earlier. Really hoping we can get that working. Okay, thanks so much for watching, guys. Again, love all the comments. Had some really good ideas shared for what we could do. For the lower playfield over here. And yeah, we'll see what we end up doing. I'm not positive. I like several of the ideas. I just can't decide. So yeah, I got to figure out a little something in here. Okay. Again, thanks so much for watching, guys. We'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.